now that we've talked about units and standard units, let's see how to convert from one unit to another. And we're actually not going to use SI in this example because it is important to know how to use more non-standard units. And so for example, let's say we know that 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet, which again is telling you, is showing you another example why using the standard units that we use in America is just not a good idea. But if we divide both sides by 5,280 feet, we see that 1 mile divided by 5,280 feet is actually the same thing as 5,280 feet divided by 1 mile is 1. Right? And as we said before, these are both units of length. So now if we know that something is 10 miles, well, we all know that if I just multiply 10 miles by 1, it's still 10 miles. So if I take 10 miles and I multiply it by 1, which is 1 mile divided into 5,280 feet, we see the miles cancel out. We have a 10 times 5,280, which is now 52,800 feet. And so that's how we do it for length. But now let's look at something like area. It's a little bit more complicated. So now let's say that we measure something and we see that it's 1 square mile. Okay, we say the square first, but we actually write it mathematically as a mile squared. And so if we have something that's a square mile, again we can say it's 1 mile squared. Now we'll multiply it by 5,280 feet over 1 mile, which is just 1. But then we have to multiply it by another 5,280 feet divided by 1 mile, which again is 1. But now notice that the mile squared cancel out, so we get 5,280 square feet. But again, before, notice that we had, when we're talking about miles, we're talking about units of length. So we went from one measurement of length, a mile, to another measurement of length, foot. Similarly, we started with an area here, miles squared, because area is length squared. So we have to make sure that we end up with an area at the end, feet squared, or square feet, which is also another measurement of area. So the units check out. And we're going to talk more about this in the next lecture, because a very large number of the mistakes that you're going to make in this class and in any other context where you're doing things in science, measuring quantities, there's going to be, in the vast majority of them, you're going to be able to find your mistake just by checking the units. Because if all of a sudden I had ended up with something where instead of having, feet, square feet, I just had feet, that tells me right away there's something wrong here. Because I started out with an area and I get something as a length, and I know that that's wrong. So this is what we're going to explore more in the next lecture.